Whispers of the Forgotten Valley. Prologue, a gentle beginning. I don't remember when I first arrived here. There was no sudden flash, no doorway between worlds. Just the sense that I was walking somewhere familiar, and then, not. The air was softer, the colors richer, as though the world had dipped itself in honeyed light. My footsteps left no mark, and yet I knew I was not alone. All around me, the earth hummed with quiet life, gentle winds rustled through oversized ferns, the scent of moss and warm earth curled upward, and somewhere far off, a low call echoed, soft and slow, like the yawn of the world itself. I did not know it then, but I had found the Forgotten Valley. Chapter 1, The Edge of the Valley. I walked along a path that wasn't really a path. The ground beneath me was soft, spongy almost, and it yielded ever so slightly with each step. Great trees, taller than I'd ever seen before, arched overhead. Their leaves were wide and thick, and some shimmered with colors I couldn't name, greens tinged with lavender, blues that leaned toward gold. It was then I heard the low rustle. Not threatening, not sudden, but steady. A presence. And when I looked up past the trees, something moved. Enormous. Graceful. A dinosaur. A long-necked creature stood near the river, dipping its head gently into the water. Its eyes, enormous and amber-colored, blinked slowly. It didn't notice me, or if it did, it wasn't bothered. I watched it drink, the slow motion of its neck rising and falling like a willow in a breeze. I had seen drawings of dinosaurs in books, in museums. But this was something different. It was quiet. Present. Not a relic of the past but a part of now. I sat nearby, not too close. The warm air wrapped around me like a blanket, and the ground whispered through the grass. It wasn't just the creatures that moved slowly here. Time itself seemed to stretch, unhurried. A dragonfly, larger than any I'd seen, hovered in front of me. Its wings caught the light like thin crystal, and as it drifted away, I felt a pull to follow. And so I did. Chapter 2, Beneath the Fern Canopy. The path curved gently beneath an archway of towering ferns, their fronds nearly brushing the earth. I walked without haste, each step a quiet echo of the last. The air here was cooler, kissed by dew, and the light filtering through the green veil above turned the world into shifting shades of jade and silver. I paused beneath a particularly large fern. Its stem was as thick as my arm, and its leaf spread out like an umbrella over a hidden hollow. I crouched down to peer inside and found a small pool, clear as glass, nestled in the roots. At the edge of the water, tiny creatures, no bigger than pebbles, blinked at me with round, curious eyes. They looked like miniature lizards, but their scales shimmered like opal. One blinked slowly, and I blinked back. There was no need for words. Everything in this place seemed to understand silence better than speech. Above, a gentle rustle stirred the canopy. I looked up just in time to see a flock of feathered dinosaurs gliding from one tree to another. They chirped softly, their feathers painted in patterns like starlight. I watched them move with such ease, as if they belonged to both sky and earth at once. Following the curve of the land, I found myself climbing a low ridge. The air grew warmer again, and a golden glow began to paint the ferns in soft light. At the top, I saw the valley stretch before me, lush, endless, serene. Dinosaurs of all shapes moved slowly below, long-tailed, horned, beaked, winged. Yet none roared. None chased. They lived here like the trees did, part of the rhythm, not rulers of it. I sat down on a flat stone and let my thoughts drift. I had no need to go anywhere, no urgency to return. The valley welcomed me with open arms, and I melted into its stillness. Time passed, though I could not tell how much. The sun never seemed to rise or fall sharply here. Light simply shifted, slow as a sigh, changing the colors of the leaves and sky in a lazy circle. A gentle wind blew, carrying with it the scent of something sweet, ripe fruit, perhaps. I followed it deeper into the forest. Chapter 3, The Orchard of Echoes. The forest opened suddenly, like a curtain drawn back, revealing an orchard of trees bearing fruit I had never seen. The trees stood in careful rows, yet no hand had planted them. Their trunks were smooth and barkless, their branches curved in elegant spirals. The fruit hung low, round and glimmering, like soft lanterns. Some were pale green, others deep blue, and a few glowed faintly in shades of rose and silver. I reached out and touched one. It was warm, not hot, with a gentle thrum beneath the skin, like a heartbeat. I did not eat it, I wasn't hungry, but holding it filled me with a quiet calm, as though the tree was sharing a memory. Nearby, a stegosaurus rested under a tree, its plates catching the shifting light. It glanced at me once, then returned to chewing slowly on the grass. Its tail swayed side to side like a lullaby, steady and slow. I walked further into the orchard. Each tree had a different scent, and the air was thick with layers of sweetness and earth. I sat down beneath one with silver blossoms and closed my eyes. In the distance, I heard a sound, not a roar, not a call, but something between a sigh and a song. It seemed to come from everywhere at once. The ground, the trees, the sky. It was the valley singing to itself. A lullaby, maybe, or a memory long remembered. And I listened. Chapter 4, The Slow River. The orchard gave way to a field, and beyond it, I saw the glint of water, a river that did not rush or ripple, but flowed as though time itself was taking a moment to rest. The river was wide, with banks of soft moss and smooth stones. Its surface mirrored the sky so perfectly that for a moment, I thought I was gazing upward rather than down. Strange lily-like plants floated silently, their petals glowing faintly, pulsing with a rhythm slower than breath. I approached the edge and knelt. My reflection met me, softened, gentler somehow. Not quite myself, and yet completely me. I dipped my fingers into the water. It was neither cold nor warm, just present. It hummed faintly, and the sensation ran up my arm, not unpleasant, but deep, like being remembered. A family of small dinosaurs wandered past me, their legs barely making a sound. They walked through the shallow edges of the river without disturbing a single ripple. The tallest among them turned its head slightly, as if acknowledging me, and then continued. I followed the river upstream, where the banks narrowed and twisted. Ferns leaned over the water, their tips brushing its surface. Every now and then, a splash would break the stillness, a fish, perhaps, or something else entirely. I never saw what caused them, only the widening circles left behind. Further on, I found a bridge. It was made of vines and stone, but there were no signs of construction, no marks of tools. It had always been here, I thought. Grown this way, knowing it would be needed. I crossed slowly. Beneath me, the water flowed in golden threads, catching light from nowhere. I lingered halfway across, leaning on the smooth vines. The world around me exhaled in soft harmony, leaves shifting, water flowing, sky dimming into hues of rose and violet. There was no hurry, no reason to move quickly. I stayed there a long while, just watching. And when I reached the other side, the land rose gently, and the sound of the river faded behind me like a lullaby that knew it had done its work. Chapter 5: The Meadow of Quiet Giants. At the top of the rise, the trees parted, and I stepped into a vast, open meadow. The grasses here were taller than I was, their tips glowing like they had caught stardust. The wind moved through them in slow, rippling waves. And in the distance, moving like mountains with breath, were the giants. Brachiosaurus. Gentle, towering, each step deliberate and slow. They moved together as if tied by invisible threads of rhythm. A mother and her young walked beside each other, necks bending down now and then to graze from the treetops that framed the meadow. Their size was immense, yet they stirred no fear. Their eyes were deep and kind. They moved as though the world beneath them was precious, and they treated it as such. I walked among them, and none minded. One bent its head, and I stood quietly beneath its shadow. The sound of its breath was like wind through stone. Bird-like creatures nested in the crests of their backs, chirping softly. The dinosaurs carried them without notice, as if companionship was simply part of life. I laid down in the grass, surrounded by the warmth of the ground, the soft rustling of the breeze, and the distant calls of the giants. Above, the sky had begun to turn indigo, dotted with soft, wandering stars. A pterosaur glided across the sky, its wings catching the last amber light. The world around me slowed further, as if to match the rhythm of my own heart. My thoughts quieted. No questions. No worries. Just presence. Just being. And somewhere within the tall grasses, the earth sang once again, low and kind. Chapter 6: The Fossil Grove. Beyond the meadow, the land shifted once more, gently sloping downward into a grove unlike any I had seen before. The trees here were petrified, frozen in time, yet not lifeless. Their trunks were stone, smooth and marbled with patterns that looked like ancient runes. But their branches still reached skyward, and soft moss draped over them like veils of memory. I stepped into the grove with quiet steps. The air was cooler, stiller, like the breath of something deep and old. I could hear my own footsteps more clearly here, each one softened by layers of earth and time. At the center of the grove stood a great fossilized tree. It was unlike the others. Its base was wide enough to house a small village, and its roots, though stone, curled gently through the earth like sleeping limbs. Despite being made of rock, the tree seemed to pulse faintly with a kind of life. Not movement, not light, just presence. I reached out and placed a hand on the bark. It was cool and smooth, and as I touched it, I felt a quiet hum, like a deep, forgotten song echoing from beneath the surface. A memory, perhaps, not mine, but one held in the stone. Around the base of the tree, fossilized bones lay in peaceful arrangements, skulls, spines, ribs, each one gently embraced by moss and lichen. But nothing here was sad. Nothing mourned. It was not a place of endings, but of remembering. I sat down beside the roots and watched tiny creatures scurry across the stone. They were insect-like but soft and glowing, as if made of mist and fireflies. One climbed onto my hand, rested a moment, and moved on. There were no sounds of movement, no calls or roars, only the wind, shifting softly through the grove, and the occasional whisper of leaves brushing stone. I stayed there for a long while, listening. Chapter 7: The Mirror Lake. The path from the fossil grove wound slowly downward, becoming smoother, softer, until it opened into a wide clearing. At the center of this space, there was a lake, so still it looked like a pane of glass laid over the earth. Its surface reflected the sky perfectly, though there were no clouds, only soft bands of light and the faint traces of drifting stars. I walked to the edge and knelt. My reflection greeted me again, as it had in the river, but here it was clearer, more real, yet more dreamlike. I looked into the water and saw not just myself, but places I had passed, meadows, groves, rivers, and moments I hadn't noticed, like the gentle glance of a dinosaur or the breeze lifting my hair. This lake remembered everything. I cupped some of the water in my hands, though it slipped through my fingers like liquid light. It left no trace on my skin, only a feeling of softness, of peace. A gentle ripple spread across the surface, and a creature rose. It was unlike any I'd seen before, long and elegant, like a plesiosaur, but covered in fine feathers that shimmered like starlight. It moved with such grace, not disturbing the water, as if it was part of the lake itself. It looked at me. Not with curiosity, not with recognition, but with acceptance. As if I had always been meant to come here. It dipped its head once, then vanished beneath the surface, leaving only stillness. I sat down at the water's edge and leaned back into the grass, my arms stretched behind me. The stars above and below blinked slowly. The world did not rush. It breathed. And I breathed with it. Chapter 8: The Floating Grove. When I finally rose from the shore of the Mirror Lake, the air had shifted. Not in temperature or scent, but in feeling, lighter, as though I had shed something invisible. I walked slowly along the shore, the water to my right, a gentle breeze at my back, until I reached a rise dotted with white flowers that seemed to sway without wind. At the top of the hill, the world changed. The trees were no longer rooted in the ground. They floated. Dozens, no, hundreds, of trees drifted silently in the air, their roots exposed, trailing misty tendrils as though dipped in clouds. Some hung low, their branches brushing the grass, others floated high, swaying gently like lanterns tethered by memory alone. I stepped into the grove, unsure if I was dreaming within the dream. One of the lower trees hovered just above the path, its wide leaves curling downward like fingers reaching to touch. I reached up, and my fingertips brushed a leaf. It was cool and dry, like paper soaked in light. The tree responded, its roots curling slightly, its trunk rising a little higher, as if politely acknowledging my presence. I continued forward, weaving between floating trunks and drifting petals. The ground here was soft and springy, blanketed in moss that seemed to glow faintly. My footsteps left no mark. Among the trees, small winged reptiles, pterosaurs, perhaps, glided slowly, their wings catching flecks of light. They circled the trees like bees around flowers, not hurried, not afraid. They, too, belonged to this quiet, impossible place. One floated near me. It was no larger than a cat, with wings that shimmered like dragonfly glass. It hovered, tilting its head, then drifted beside me, gliding forward as if inviting me to follow. I did. The creature led me to the center of the grove, where a single, enormous tree floated higher than the others. Its trunk was twisted and smooth, like it had grown from braided air. The roots curled beneath it like the arms of a dancer, swaying slowly. I looked up. And then, without a sound, the tree lowered. It descended until its lowest roots brushed the top of my head, then gently wrapped around me, not touching, just encircling, as if the tree was giving me shelter, without walls, without weight. I sat down beneath it, in a small hollow of light and shade, and leaned back. The air shimmered. The leaves above whispered. And for a long while, I listened to nothing at all. Chapter 9, The Valley of Mists. When I awoke, though it felt more like returning from thought than from sleep, the floating grove had grown stiller, quieter, as if it, too, was resting. I rose and continued, following a path that wasn't carved but gently suggested by the way the moss leaned or the trees opened slightly. The air grew cooler again, thick with moisture, and soon a soft mist curled at my feet. Not fog exactly, but something lighter. It shimmered faintly in the pale light, drifting in curls and threads that danced without breeze. As I descended, the mist thickened until the world ahead of me was wrapped in silver. Then, like the lifting of a veil, I stepped into a vast open basin surrounded by low cliffs covered in ferns. The mist pooled here like a lake of air, soft and glowing. I could see only the tops of the tallest grasses and the backs of dinosaurs moving slowly through the haze, gentle giants barely outlined, like sketches half finished in moonlight. I walked forward, and the mist parted just enough to allow me through, curling behind me again like a curtain. The ground beneath was warm and firm, and as I moved, my footsteps left ripples, not in the earth, but in the mist itself. It was as if the valley remembered every step I took. A long, low call echoed somewhere in the fog. Not loud. Not startling. A hum, drawn across the air like a bow on strings. A communication not meant for me, but not excluding me either. I paused and looked upward. Through the mist, a sun, or something like it, glowed gently, casting no harsh light, only illumination. The valley had no shadows. Only softness. Near the center, I came upon a group of creatures gathered in quiet stillness. Small dinosaurs, resting in circles, their bodies curled gently into one another. One raised its head slightly as I approached, blinking slowly. Then it laid back down, unconcerned. I sat beside them, the mist cooling my face, wrapping around my arms like a shawl of cloud. There were no boundaries here, no edges to the valley. No beginning or end. It simply was, a place not of distance, but of feeling. And that feeling was peace. Chapter 10, The Lull of the Stones. When I left the misted valley, it was not because I wanted to. It was because the land seemed to gently suggest I continue. Not with words or signs, but with a shift in the wind, a tilt in the light. The trail wound upward once more, narrowing between low stones covered in lichen and velvet moss. Each stone hummed faintly as I passed, not with sound, but with presence. I imagined that if I paused and placed my ear against one, I might hear the slow heartbeat of the earth itself. Eventually, the trail opened into a plateau ringed by tall standing stones. Some were smooth, others cracked with age, yet all stood upright, arranged in gentle spirals. This place felt ancient. Not in a way that suggested age as a burden, but age as wisdom, soft and listening. I walked to the center and sat. The ground was warmer here, though no sun shone down directly. It felt like the heat of remembered sunlight, the way a stone holds the day long after the sky has turned. A quiet breeze moved through the stones, low and circular, a rhythm without urgency. I closed my eyes. And then the stones began to hum. Very faintly at first, then just enough to feel in my chest, not sound, not music, but the suggestion of both. A vibration that matched my breath, and then slowed it. I sat still, wrapped in that sound, that feeling. It wasn't calling me. It was simply, being. The world grew quieter still. My thoughts loosened, drifting outward like petals on water. The stones stood around me like guardians of calm, unmoving, but deeply alive. Somewhere, distant thunder rolled, not from the sky, but from the feet of a creature walking slowly, steadily, through another part of the valley. It was a reminder, the world still moved, even in stillness. I remained in the circle for a long time, maybe hours, maybe more. The hum softened, as if even the stones had said all they needed to. And then, with a long breath, I stood once more. Chapter 11, The Dinosaur Garden. The path led me downward again, gently spiraling through soft hills where wildflowers bloomed in every color I could imagine, and many I could not. Their petals moved as I passed, not closing or hiding, but following, as though greeting an old friend they had been waiting for. Then, the trees opened, and I saw it. A garden. Not made by hands, but by time, by nature, by something that understood stillness better than any gardener. Stone walkways curved lazily between tall flowering plants and low bushes heavy with fruit. Vines hung like curtains from arching trees, and wide stone benches sat in half circles beneath them, as if the world itself had built places to rest. And throughout the garden moved dinosaurs, not the towering giants of the meadow or the mysterious swimmers of the lake, but smaller ones, colorful and curious. They moved through the garden without fear. One nibbled at a bright red fruit, another chased a butterfly with gentle hops. A third sat entirely still beside a pool, staring into its depths as if in deep thought. I wandered among them, not a visitor, but a quiet participant in their world. Near the center of the garden was a raised circle, a platform of smooth stone, wide enough for many, yet occupied only by silence. I stepped onto it and looked up. Above me, the sky had turned a soft gold, streaked with the first stars of evening. The air felt heavier now, not with weight, but with gentleness, as if the day itself were curling up to rest. One dinosaur, feathered and the size of a small dog, approached me. Its eyes were wide and deep. It walked in slow circles around me, then lay down at my feet, breathing in long, even sighs. I sat beside it, leaning back on the stone, feeling it grow warmer beneath me, as though it remembered the sun. The garden whispered. Leaves brushed against one another in soft applause. Flowers nodded in the breeze. The dinosaurs moved with the kind of peace that doesn't need to be explained. And for a moment, I could no longer tell where I ended and the world began. Chapter 12, The Sky Field. The garden faded behind me like the echo of a dream, and I followed a narrow trail bordered by glowing mushrooms and drifting seeds that floated like tiny lanterns. I climbed, slowly and steadily, not because it was difficult, but because I wanted to feel each step. With every footfall, the air grew thinner, clearer, filled with a kind of space I couldn't describe. At last, I reached the sky field. It wasn't a field in the usual sense, there was no grass, no soil. It was a wide open plain of pale, glowing stone that shimmered like dew. Above me, the sky stretched wide and endless, filled with stars that blinked slowly like they were breathing. Some moved, gliding like slow fish through a celestial sea. And below me, nothing. The sky field floated. Far, far below, I could see clouds. Beneath them, pieces of the valley I had walked, the mirror lake glinting faintly, the fossil grove glowing in soft veins, the slow river like a ribbon laid across velvet. And dinosaurs flew here. Not gliding creatures like pterosaurs, but great, winged dinosaurs, feathered in hues of silver and deep plum, moving silently across the stars. They did not flap their wings so much as drift, like leaves on a gentle current. One passed so close that I felt the breeze of its wings. I lay down on the smooth stone. Above me, the stars hummed in slow pulses. A comet drifted past, trailing soft light behind it. One of the flying dinosaurs circled gently, then soared upward and vanished beyond the curve of the sky. My thoughts slowed further, dissolving like fog at dawn. I was weightless, not floating, not falling, just held. The sky field didn't ask anything of me. It only offered space. To breathe. To be. Chapter 13, The Nest of Stars. I don't recall standing. I don't recall choosing to move. But I found myself drifting from the sky field, not walking anymore, not floating either, just carried, as if the very air beneath me had become a soft current guiding me onward. The stars above grew brighter, larger, as though I was rising to meet them. But there was no wind, no rush, only the steady hush of a world that had grown quieter than quiet. And then, I saw it. A nest. Cradled in the open sky, suspended between clouds that held no rain, was a great bowl of woven light and silver branches. It wasn't perched on any cliff or tree, it simply floated there, vast and open, as if the universe had made a cradle for the night. Within the nest were eggs. Not fragile. Not small. These were luminous orbs, the size of boulders, pulsing slowly with a soft glow from within, pale blue, gentle gold, silvery green. Each throbbed faintly, like a heartbeat slowed to the rhythm of the stars. I stepped closer. My foot touched nothing solid, but I did not fall. The nest accepted me, supported me as though I belonged there. I moved to the edge of one glowing egg and sat beside it. My hand hovered over its surface. I didn't need to touch it to feel its warmth. Its rhythm began to echo in my chest, and my breathing followed. Beside the eggs, curled like guardians of light, lay the feathered parents. Gigantic, ancient, and kind. Their eyes opened slowly as I approached, glowing faintly with galaxies reflected in their gaze. One blinked at me, very slowly, and then closed its eyes again. Not guarding. Not warning. Simply witnessing. I sat there a long time, wrapped in silence and light, in rhythms older than language. And above me, stars continued to drift like dandelions on a sleeping wind. Chapter 14, The Return That Wasn't. Eventually, I felt something shift, not outside me, but within. A gentle tug, like the turning of a page. A signal not to leave, but to move forward again. I rose slowly from the nest of stars, and as I did, the sky dimmed, not darker, just deeper. As if pulling a soft blanket closer. The path forward didn't appear all at once. It revealed itself with each step. Pale stones lighting beneath my feet, one by one, guiding me down from the stars towards something quieter still. The trail passed again through many of the places I had seen, the edge of the valley, the slow river, the garden, but they were changed. Or perhaps I was. Everything felt slower, softer, held in an eternal exhale. The dinosaurs I passed no longer watched me. They simply continued. Their eyes carried no surprise, no curiosity. Just knowing. They knew I had been here. They knew I had listened. The trail finally led to a clearing I did not remember seeing before. It was small and ringed with gentle hills, each topped with a single glowing stone. In the center stood a smooth platform of earth, surrounded by ferns curling inward like hands at rest. I stepped onto it, and the ground sighed beneath me. Not loudly. Not even out loud. Just, inside. I lay down. There was no sky above now. Only light. No sound. Only breath. Not mine, not the world's, both. Epilogue, a place that remains. I do not remember waking. I remember lying there, eyes closed, feeling the rhythm of the valley wrap around me like a melody played just once, perfectly. And when I opened my eyes again, I was elsewhere. But something had come with me. Not a memory. Not a vision. Just the echo of a world where dinosaurs still walked, not with fear or fire, but with stillness. A place where time forgot how to hurry. A place that asked for nothing, and gave everything in return. I carry that rhythm now. In the way I breathe. In the way I listen. In the way I let the world be soft. Because somewhere, even now, the valley remains. Waiting. Not for footsteps, but for stillness.